Start the recording and I'm going to move us over to Facebook.
Just crazy. I gotta, but before you switch us over, can I make a confession?
Yep.
I've never even seen a Facebook page. I'm not kidding.
You're the smartest man in the
I'm
group.
dead serious.
Well,
I'm dead serious about
If
that.
you were going to join one, join Julie's end, which is Kansas Parents Teachers.
Well, that's why we're here.
Yeah,
So
that's the one you'd like.
I'm hitting the button.
All
There
right.
you go.
Here we go.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the 802 United for another amazing statewide town hall to talk about topics near and dear to all of our hearts. And we brought you some content experts who also, this is their heart. This is not just their job. And I know you're going to really enjoy meeting them today. I'm going to kick us off by just explaining a little bit of what the 802 United is. And I have my handy dandy website right here so I can read off the mission and vision of the 802 United. We're named after the August 2nd victory in 2022, where Kansas was the first state to stand up and say, no, we are not going to accept an abortion ban in our state. You're going to have to vote no again in 2026, spoiler alert. But meanwhile, the 802 United is a Kansas-based, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to education and awareness of Kansans regarding issues that affect us all. We use the 3Vs method to make the change we want to see in the world: voices, volunteering, and voting. We value people over policies and place empathy and opportunity centered to our conversations. We're here to help make Kansas a welcoming environment for all people. And that's our aim when we talk to you this evening. Of note, if you're on the Facebook page, I'm going to be monitoring. So if you have questions, you can put them there. All right, now I'm going to shut up and turn it over to Julie.
Well, thank you there, Betsy. I would like to welcome my very dear friends, John and Deb Teese. I've known Deb anyway for probably 25 years.
Long time.
And then I met John because I knew Deb. So they're going to here to talk to us about mental health in our schools. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background on both of them. Both John and Deb are licensed mental health social workers. They both are in private practice in the Hutchinson area. And John has several expertise, and they are in anxiety, depression, behavioral issues, trauma, abuse, and he is actually considered to be by the courts in Kansas the expert on child PTSD. And Deb, she also has a private practice and works in the anxiety and depression area. And she has a little wider selection. She has just recently opened up a second, what would you call that? A second clinic?
It's a practice. It's a movement and sound practice.
Yes, it's the movement and sound practice. And there she taps into her Reiki training. She's a master at that. She also is very good at hypnosis. So if you want hypnotized, she's your go-to girl.
Works on me all the time.
It's been good for you, let me tell you. So, Livy wants to be heard tonight. Hugo wants to be seen. We're going to just pretend like they're not here because their dad decided he was going to go fishing and he's not here to supervise them. We're here to talk about, the piece I forgot is that both Deb and John have worked in the schools. When I first met Deb, she was working for a special ed cooperative. And then I had the opportunity to hire her to be our social worker where I was the principal. And she spent several years in that capacity. And John also joined the district as a counselor at one of the grade schools. So they have experience in the clinical part and in the school part. So we're just going to get started tonight, and I'm going to just ask them some questions. based upon what you guys see in your practice, because neither one of them are in school anymore, but based upon what you see in your current practice, what do you see as our public schools awareness for advocacy for students and staff around mental health?
Well, I think, that there's always been a sensitivity to that, which is a credit to the schools. But I also think, quite frankly, it was interesting because I had a guy that came in a few weeks ago, and he was a fairly young man in his 30s, and he looked at me and how old I am, and he goes, "Hey, man," he goes, "you've probably been doing this, longer than I've been alive." And I said, "That's correct. I've been doing this for 36 years." And he said, "What do you think about everything that's going on?" And I said, well, let me put it to you this way. I don't think the world's getting any more sane. And so, for me, I think the priority of mental health just generally across the country is really important. But one of the things that I found when I was working in the schools is that they're the gatekeepers of a lot of that stuff. If you can affect change within the community and have broad impacting things, you start with the little kids, and that allows you to increase the network to be able to touch other people's lives. And I think that there's been a more concerted effort with, unfortunately, violence within our schools that has been just horrible, and so devastating to so many people across the country. And then just also, I think our kids are struggling more with increased issues than they ever really kind of ever have before. So I do think the schools are doing much better. I think that some initiatives have happened to be more trauma sensitive, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I'm going to give Deb a little chance to speak on that as well. But I think it's something that I don't think that it's something we have to be lax on. I think as a matter of fact, I think it's integral to be able to learn. Look, if you're not mentally healthy and you're out, in your own world, and kind of disassociated because you're, dealing with trauma or anxiety or depression or the like, it's going to affect your ability to be an effective student or an educator for that matter, because there are people that struggle with, issues with that as well. And it's a normal part of the human condition, unfortunately, to sometimes have struggles and have life's problems, as Miniger said. But if you can come about it from a health perspective and try to talk about people being mentally healthy, I think that's a good start.
Deb, do you have anything you want to add?
That's pretty comprehensive. So I guess the only thing that I would add to that would be that I think that the schools in the districts, it is more of a talked about issue in the districts. I do believe that some are more proactive with mental health than others, and I keep hoping that all of them keep that as a priority in the school system, because as John said, I see it as something that we're going to have to continue to stay on top of. So
I also think it's more accepted to be able to access, help, that people are more open to it, and that there's an understanding that, if you have a mental health condition, I always talk to people about that all the time too, clients, and when I was in the schools as well. A person who has a mental health issue, they're not a mental health issue. They're a human being that has a condition that needs to be addressed.
And that's
If
the
that
way we
makes
should
sense.
treat them.
Right.
Yes.
Along with any other kind of thing that falls in the paradigm of learning. If you have a learning disability or something, I mean, you may learn differently or that sort of thing. I think you got to look at person and environment and understand. And I think schools are much more understanding of that now than ever before, which is to their credit.
So as I look back over my career in education and I look at what's going on in the world today, things are very different. And you work with, well, I know that Deb works with teachers and I know that John works with kids. What are some of the common things that you see today with mental health needs with the people that you work with? And how has that changed, especially since the pandemic?
well, is it okay if I?
Yeah, you go first.
Okay. Something that I'm seeing that has just increased exponentially has been depression and anxiety. And I kind of have some theories on that, not just myself, but other mental health professionals. We're seeing that so much more in the schools, not just with the kids, but also with staff too. I'm just gonna say, I think that some of that is due to we are overinformed all the time.
Yeah.
I think back to, I grew up in the 70s, and in the 70s, we didn't have information coming at us like we do now. I know that I'm not working with young children like John is, but I'm working with some teens and some young adults, and they have great concerns about their future. They're struggling with having hope. And you think, okay, well, we've got information coming at us all the time that is pretty traumatic about wars and what we've got going on in our own nation. And I just think that information overload is causing a lot of depression and anxiety. It isn't that we don't need that information, but how many times do we I went to go pick up Noah, our grandson at school, and we're all on devices. We're not even talking, where parents are standing outside waiting to pick up kids, grandparents, and everybody's on a device. So I do know that as far as even if we're looking at, diagnoses in the brain, it just isn't good for our brains to have that all the time. So that's what I'm seeing too.
One thing I'd like to jump in on that is you got to think about this. Originally, knowledge was very, very refined. It usually was tied to, either universities or religious affiliations. And they literally transcribed things on parchment paper. And it took 2,000 years for the body of knowledge to expand from the Gutenberg press. Well, I saw a thing recently that now it's like every 7 hours, the body of knowledge. And here's the thing, that's a wonderful and powerful thing. However, it's just like everything else in life. It also has its negative side with it as well. And, and it's bombarded, it bombards people constantly, and that there's more access to more information. And it is difficult because, with the advent of a device or whatever, you can access that, and you can even be very young. And if there isn't supervision or some way to process that out, it is a lot of exposure, and not all of that's good. I mean, I think knowledge is power, and I'm not trying to suppress information, but I think especially with very young, impressionable people like children, having some kind of work within the home is important. I think the other thing too is that the schools are asked to do more and more all the time. I wrote a program for character ed that was like basically from scratch, and it used to be that a lot of that stuff kind of happened within the home, and now you got situations where family are really struggling, especially in schools where there's a lot of free and reduced, that there's other types of trauma and problems and substance abuse and trying to make ends meet and that sort of thing. And so I think that that's been a real interesting thing. And then also too with COVID was really, for me, my father was a microbiology professor. And so for me, it was always kind of a matter of, I talk to people about this. It's not a matter of if something like that happens, it's when and how bad it's going to be. And the thing that was particularly salient, I think, about COVID that was really bad is that COVID hit us both, the two main places where you live. You have to be able to associate with other people because man is a social animal. Human beings are social animals, and you have to breathe. And it just was a tough combination. And I think it really had a pretty detrimental effect really on everybody. I think that there's so many things with people, that some of the things that they had to kind of do to contain it, it also created other issues as well. It was not a good thing. Let's put it that way.
Well, and it's just like you say, this information overload, the rapid turnover of information from various sources that may be more or less actually telling the truth. That's got its good side and its bad side. In the same sense, great. I'm a physician. I know that some of those shutdowns saved lives, especially for my pregnant women. But on the other hand, they were home, basically homeschooling their kids, and it took them out of the workforce. And it just was a huge blow. So you're right, it's the give and take.
And it's also hard too, because, who defines what, for me, with all due respect to you, I like to really stay focused more on fact than truth, because I think a lot of times, one of the things that's interesting, with just the exposure to information, it's really hard, especially in the world of AI now. They could even put, I mean, how do you even know this is really me? You don't.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know. It's interesting. It's very powerful. It's really good in many, many ways. But I think the one thing that's kind of interesting is I think I'm hopeful, and this is not really as a therapist, but as somebody might, has family in academia, and we also worked in the educational setting. I think the importance of helping kids and young adults, and even for that matter, staff, to be able to think critically is more important than ever, because you have to be able to really analyze things and look at things from a lot of different perspectives in this world, because there's just so much information. How do you filter it all out, and how do you know?
Yeah,
I don't
I
know.
would just
It's daunting.
I would just add to that. We just recently shut our Dish Network or whatever we had off. And the news station ran 24/7 at our house. And I think I feel better already now that I don't have to see all that. And I wasn't on my
Well,
phone hardly at all.
yeah. Well, we do know, as well as adults and kids, everything that you watch or you see, your subconscious thinks you've been exposed to it. It doesn't say Julie's watching a news channel. It says Julie is witnessing this event that's on. So if you think about that, with all the kids, and everyone that's seeing constant trauma, or whatever's going on in the world, in addition to violence and information, our brains are logging that as we experienced it.
Yeah, and that's a good point that you make, hon. Oh, sorry, Deb. Anyway, that I'll probably do that more than once. But anyway, not only just in terms of like intrapsychically, but the limbic system of the brain is what we call diffuse. It's not like your cortex. When memories are encoded into the limbic system, it causes, like, especially like with trauma, like you're there in the immediate moment, and that it's non-diffuse, it's not temporal. So if you're constantly being bombarded by this stuff, and even if it's vicariously, it is getting encoded. And we are living in really, really interesting times. Because one of the things that was interesting, I think, about COVID as well, is the technology aspect. We were like delineated as being essential workers or whatever, and we were able to, they kind of freed things up in terms of the government, to allow us to use, teleconferencing and all these other kinds of things. I think if we didn't have that technology, and then it was really interesting, because they shut the schools down. And then they said, "Oh, okay, we're going to, help everybody to be a computer expert and do all this technology stuff." And then they opened it back up, which I think they were trying to do the best that they were able to do. But I mean, it was really interesting. I mean, because there you go again, schools were asked to do things, that they're technically, I mean, I mean, some of those people were IT people maybe or whatever, but, a person teaching kindergarten is probably not have a specialty in IT. So it just is interesting. I mean, but I do think, like, on a emotional level and that sort of thing, I think it was really hard for everyone. Just incredibly difficult.
Yep, and you nailed it when you said it's going to happen, and it's not going to be preventable. I see another one of those things happening in the very near future. But
Well, the interesting thing that happened with that too, with I was on a task force through the mental health center, when they were worried about an advent of bird flu, and I got to see some records and that sort of thing from Spanish flu. And actually, Spanish flu started at Fort Riley in 1918, and it was somewhat similar, but it was, much more virulent. So again, I'm hopeful, but biology is biology, I guess.
yeah. So we know that we have a teacher shortage in Kansas, and we also know by looking at the statistics that we have a number of individuals who are licensed to teach, but have, for whatever reason, made a choice not to. And some of that and I witnessed this when I was a principal, and I witnessed it when I worked for the teachers union. There's a lot of teacher burnout that we see. Um, do you guys feel like that teacher burnout is preventable? And if it is, I'm guessing Deb sees people that might be in that position. What kind of techniques do you use to help them get through that?
Well, I do think that a lot of burnout is happening for a lot of reasons. I think that kind of like with our kids, we never know what goes on behind closed doors. Same way with educators. We don't know how many educators are dealing with maybe, financial issues, things going on regarding maybe an illness. It seems like there's a rise in autoimmune disorders. I mean, we've got a lot of people that are trying to manage a lot of things, not just at the school, but at home. And then when you throw in the kids at the school that are struggling like they are and trying to manage that, I am seeing a lot of burnout. So as far as techniques or things that I encourage them to do, obviously a lot of self-care. And depending on the person, there's different things that I'll advise on that. I am a big breath work person. And I also encourage people to do breath work on their own, talk to them about how it resets the brain and that it does wonderful things for the body. I don't have it right now, but there's a book that I can send you later, Julie, that I encourage everyone, all my educators to read, that talks about how it helps with behaviors and temperaments with our kids. I do have a couple of people that I know that are doing breath work with their kids in the classroom every hour. Once it's like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, we're doing breath work, and it is helping not just the teacher, but the kids, and the kids managing the teachers. But I also am a big proponent that educators need to have somebody to talk to, and they need support. So we were talking, that a lot of times school districts will only offer educators 2 to 3 EAP sessions a year, and they need more than that. If I could make a recommendation, I would like for, there to be mental health support for teachers on a regular basis, like once a month or twice a month, because of what they're having to deal with in the classroom. So we do that. We do cognitive behavioral therapy, of course, and then we talk about gratitude. We when we talk about gratitude, it sounds kind of like, oh yeah, that's just more positive thinking. But what we know about the brain is that you can't be depressed and anxious in the brain the same time you're also thinking about gratitude. It just doesn't work. The brain has to kind of submit and let go and move over to the gratitude side rather than the anxiety and the depression side. So we do a lot of different things. It's based individually, on each person that comes in. But I do really want to express, I think teachers need more support. They're dealing not just with their own lives, but all the lives of all those kids in the classroom. So
That's
I mean, a lot.
a lot of lives to
That's
deal with.
that's
So,
a-
Deb
One of the,
go ahead, John.
oh, no, you can go ahead.
Well, Deb
I'll
mentioned
jump
the
in.
EAP, which is an employee assistance program. And that is offered to some of our teachers. Not all districts offer that to their teachers. And it has a variety of different components where they could seek some help in a variety of different areas. And as Deb says, I totally agree with her on that. Teaching today is hard, and you got to have somebody to talk to, constructively talk to. I can talk to my colleagues, but that's not always real constructive. It's fun, but
It's good to have that objective person who isn't in your building to kind of process things with and see it from a different perspective. Yeah.
so if
So
there are
one of-
any school administrators out there, we would really strongly encourage you to look at a robust employee assistance program because we can't afford to have any more teacher burnout. Um,
And who
One of the
decides
things,
that? Who decides how many EAP visits you get? Is that a school board thing?
It's a district
it's a
by
district
district.
thing, yeah, and sometimes it's by the EAP.
True.
and I will tell you from my experience working with teachers, it wasn't, and I always cut through the red tape and called my friend Deb and said, Deb, I have a teacher that needs something, but, and she always got them in. Um, it takes a very long time because those people that are working the EAP programs they're also swamped with needs. So
Yeah.
it's,
One of the things that I would also say, just more on a macro level, and this is just a message to come out. I think it's important for teachers to always fall back on and understand that you are doing something that is a very seminal thing that has a broad reaching impact on everyone. But I always talk about, I liken it to a commercial airline flight that, whenever the flight attendants say, if the cabin gets depressurized, you put on your own mask first, and then you take care of the people that you're supposed to take care of. And I think the other thing is training on that, to help people to look for the risk factors and also to understand. Look, a lot of times I think people get mired down on like what I call locus of control, that they're so concentrated on everything that's going on around them that they forget, hey, I'm also in control of over myself, and I need to take care of me. And I think that's important because some things you can control for, like earlier you said, vote those are things that people can control. You may not be able to control everything that's happening in the environment around you or policies or things that are set forth or whatever, but being able to take care of yourself and do things to help yourself to be a well-rounded person, and just some psychoeducational stuff about that as well, I think is helpful.
I think that's a valid point, and it's been kind of a crazy week at our house, so I'm gonna take that into my brain and remember that starting tomorrow. And Tori's had she's got some younger kids, and she's kind of had a wild week too. So Tori, that's good information for you too. Um, as we listen to that 24-hour news cycle, there has been a lot of negativity about public education here in the United States. Some of it probably is warranted, some of it is not warranted. But we see it every day, we hear it every day. Do you guys see any kind of a connection between that negativity and the mental health of our students or our staff?
Absolutely. It's okay if so, we know psychology says anytime we have a hierarchical individual or situation, influencing or talking about something, it has an impact. We call it, the power of authority. And it could be negative or can be positive, but it has a trickle down effect, and it definitely does affect people. So if you're talking about, if I'm understanding your question, that does it impact people mental health wise? If you're talking negatively about an institution, yes, definitely it does. It's going to, because people are going to pay attention to that and influence. It's like if in a family household, if everybody says green beans are terrible, then everybody in the household are going to think green beans are terrible. We better stay away from them.
I think you do think green beans are
I
tough.
use that as an example because I personally don't like green beans, but my druthers would be on that. If I could rule the world, would be I would want, I realize we have to make changes, and like you said earlier, some of the comments may be valid, but there's other ways that we can make changes, and that's by being supportive. I would rather hear from the hierarchical end. What can we do to support our educators? What can we do to support our students? Those kinds of things, rather than, criticism. I think that's something that in the world by Deb that I would love to see happen. But It definitely does have a trickle down effect. If you talk negatively, then there's this negative connotation about that particular group, and I'm concerned about it. So,
Yeah, and I think as for me, our founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, second and third presidents of the United States, they espoused to having a free state-sponsored educational system. My thing with it is it was interesting. I had a chance along with my principal to talk to, the State Board of Education several years ago about the program that we were working on. And I think it's a matter of national security to have an informed electorate. Now, I don't know, I'm a middle of the roader type person or whatever. And one of the things that I see a lot is I think that average everyday American people would like to set aside partisanship and come up with solutions. And there's nothing that's more important. Look, we have to compete on a global platform in terms of being the best and brightest and most informed people. And that's the thing that's so important about that. And I think what I would really like to see more of is let's work at solutions. But that goes back, though, to what I said earlier about locus of control. Look, people can say whatever they want about, whenever I worked in the school, there were always some people that were critics or whatever, for me, but I just stayed focused on, well, hey, what is my mission? What are the things that I can control, the things I can't control, and how can I take effective steps, action steps to do that? But I agree with, with Deb that, if you have people at the top that are not necessarily encouraging, it makes it harder.
I
People
think
need to
you
work
said,
together.
yeah, I think you said something that's really important, and not just for educators and not just for students, but for everybody. We all have our own little square, and that's all we can control is what's in that. And I oftentimes have to remind myself I can't control that, so that's gonna be whatever. But I can control this, and this is how I can make a positive impact on that. And I think that if we had a mind shift to that, um, we would be a better off as a society, and our I think our students would be better off. So um, we've talked about like the EAP, and we've talked about a little bit about counseling. What other kind of supports do you guys see as uh, either needing to be beefed up or completely missing in the educational system that you believe would make a more positive environment for our students to learn in?
Well, I think one of the things that I've seen that I think is helpful, and they also, did this too in the area of mental health, is to focus on what people's strengths are.
Hmm.
And I think it's important to focus on strengths, but I think also the thing with it is as well is that there has to also be a structure within, schools as well. And that's one of the things that's like really challenging when you got people that are shutting down or behaviorally disrupting or, just different kinds of things. I mean, I think you need to bring out the strengths in those people, but also, you have to have some level of balance with that. And I think that's going to be the age old question that's going to be hard because, everybody, in education has different viewpoints on those types of things like, mainstreaming versus having something that's more specialized or the like. But I think strength focused approaches, and also just look, it's a pretty simple thing. I talk to people, and I think Deb would agree with this. There's only three types of energy that people put off in human relationships. Either you don't care about something, you don't put off any energy at all, or you put off positive energy or negative energy. And if you're putting off negative energy into your environment, it affects everything.
It's a very good point.
And that's beyond any kind of philosophical or political, you know what I'm saying? I mean, and that's the thing that I hope that we kind of can pull together as a group of human beings and Americans. Let's try to, be positive with one another. And what kind of energy am I putting off? Because you can control that. That goes back into the box.
Yep, it does very much so. And that's also a good reminder for all of us, school people, non-school people, everybody breathing. Um, we often, unfortunately, have students who make the choice or I don't know if it's a choice or not, that choose to commit suicide. We occasionally have teachers that make that kind of a choice in their lives. What are some things that the school should be doing, working with suicide prevention, in your opinions?
Well, I think some of them are doing it. We just need to keep it going and consistent. I would say training, having mental health come out to the school and doing training on what to look for with students, and also that's good for staff to know too. Uh, Having mental health resources readily available is important. I also think that, and some of the schools do this, they're doing suicide prevention assessments, and that is sometimes a really good tool. But the other thing that I think is helpful is coming together as a community. The old saying that it takes a village to raise a kid, is true. But I also think offering community support to the schools is something that could be implemented a little bit more. I know that some areas may not have as much, I'm thinking more of your rural schools may not have as much access to resources some of our schools in the city do, but really coming together as a community and everybody participating in events. I have heard of a couple of schools that had different kinds of community events and barbecues and had like health fairs and invited businesses, to come be a part of an event in the evening and get to know the parents at the school and get to know the teachers. I just think that even helps also with suicide prevention, people being a support to one another. I do think that as a mental health community, we do have to reach out a little bit more than maybe what we have. And I think our mental health centers do a great job in reaching out, but I think that we're going to have to do so even more to help people just with everything that's going on in the world. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the other thing is one of the things I thought was a good thing when I was still at the schools, the State Department, it handed down a directive to do annual training. I don't know if that's still in effect. I hope it is, and that is a very good thing. And one of the things I just would say, to the people that are out there that are maybe viewing, I always talk to my clients that that harming yourself or ending your life is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And one of the things, especially like with high school students, the two biggest indicators of danger for that is an end of a significant relationship, interpersonal relationship with like a significant other who they're dating, and substance abuse. And so, just having people out there to be able to give information and, doing the thing. Look, there's a lot of really wonderful people that are in education that are touching people every day. And it may be just taking that little bit of extra time, even if you're tired or whatever, to listen to a concern of a student. I've worked with people that have literally said that they had a teacher that cared enough about them to take a minute. And that was the difference between them doing something or not.
I've heard those stories. So that is an important key in being a teacher, is that my dog is being a total mess. Sorry. Is that, those kids look up to you for the most part, and you need to make that personal relationship with them, building that relationship. It needs to be positive. And sometimes our kids that need that the most are the most difficult to build that relationship. for one reason or another. And
Well, and if I could jump in on that. A lot of times they test that because they have attachment problems. And so it's like, well, I'm gonna make you be Missouri and show me, and they test you. And it's hard sometimes, but if you can take just a little bit,
yeah, that was
kind of
what
like your dog is right now. He or she is testing you.
she tests me every day, John.
There you
Every
go.
single
Well,
day.
you're up to the challenge. We know you.
Lucky for her, I love her, and
Yeah, there you go.
she's a
There you
cute
go.
as a bug. So I heard you say two important clues to help school
Sure.
staff identify students struggling with mental health issues. One is the breakup of with a significant other, and the other is substance abuse. And I think those things can start as early as your late grade school periods. If
Yes.
you're talking about a younger student, what kind of clues could the school staff look for that they might be considering something like suicide?
Want to do that?
Well, I'll just do, John works mostly with kids, but I definitely think withdrawing and behavioral issues. And, the thing that I try to explain with people too is, and I think a lot of schools are doing a good job at understanding the trauma brain. You don't always respond the way you do if you don't have trauma. It's more of a reaction. The kids that are depressed as well at a really young age, they're not always sad and withdrawn. They're usually angry, because developmentally with the brain and the trauma brain, they react differently. But I think behaviors are really big clue. So go ahead.
Well, and I think that's the other thing. I mean, it's tough to be omniscient, that you know everything, However, that being said, well, I talked to you, I think the other day, Julie, when you were over visiting, if I was in a room with 100 people and I said, hey, how many of you guys need a Tylenol? There's going to be 5 hands that are going to pop up. So trauma has always existed, but
It's worse.
it's just
now.
much more severe now. There's, I think, more isolation. It's harder and harder to earn a living. The drugs that are available to people to use now are so much more powerful than they've ever been before, and it's out there. Let alone human traffic and I mean, I'm going to try to keep this as nice as possible, but I mean, there's also a lot of physical, sexual abuse, trafficking, you name it. And then you get kids that, are in foster care. And if you can imagine, it'd be analogous to like a person being a teacher and you go home and somebody in a white cargo van loads up your entire family and takes them, and then you have to go teach the next day. You're probably not going to be on your A game. And that's what happens with a lot of these kids. And I know that there's standards and expectations, and we got to do that. It's just, I think there's some, especially the little ones, if you see a lot of acting out or shutting down and that sort of thing, it's hard to know all that, because some of the histories are just, not shared or whatever, but those are indicators.
That makes total sense. So I know Deb has talked and she and I have talked before about how it actually takes a village to raise our kids up. And as a parent myself, I know that village that my son had was very important in his upbringing. And he still calls them, our friends, his aunts and uncles. Um, that's how much of an impact they had on him. But what does it look like when the parents and the community and the teachers and the mental health workers all work together to effectively support our kids? What would it be ideal in your minds?
Well, maybe I'm not answering this in the way that you want, but what I think it looks like is health and security. I, you know, I don't understand why, we wouldn't invest in one another. Of course, I am a therapist, but I think that all of us working together with the school, it looks like educators getting the support that they need and the kids getting the support that they need. And what that creates is a healthy environment. We can't fix all the problems of the world, but if we can, like John was saying earlier, we need to let the kids know, I'll put it in my way, that we care about them because they remember that, forever. But I want to make sure that we also say that about the educators too, because so many people are going into education because they love kids and they love teaching, but nobody gives you a handbook on how to deal with a kiddo in a classroom that's having intermittent explosive disorder, or having a meltdown because they didn't get any sleep the night before because of what was going on in their home. So I really want to express that our beautiful, wonderful teachers need support as well. So but what would it look like? I think it would look like good health, good security, and we need to make that a priority.
Yeah, and I would jump into again to something that I alluded to earlier, and Deb just said it in a different way. It's about what kind of energy you're putting off. And, a lot of times I think, if everybody's working together and have a common goal of helping a child, that's really important, because then you can set aside your ego and your own agenda and that sort of thing. And I think the other piece that is very, very important is clarity and communication, because I think a lot of times you'll have situations where, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And boy, does that lead to a lot of difficulties. And having, specificity in terms of, like, if you're a mental health professional, and it's hard because there's so many other things that, teachers and other staff are asked to do. But that's like, if you had somebody that floated around and was able to witness these kids and actually, have the funding or the support for that, that would take that off of, like, teachers or whatever, and that they would actually maybe be a little bit more trained in what to look for. So then you could do behavioral interventions as a mental health professional to help that student to be able to learn. Because at the end of the day, this is the thing I always stress all the time. What are kids there for? They're there to learn stuff. I mean, and that's the thing. There's so many other things that are running interference that it's hard to kind of get to that actual mission statement of really what the schools are intended for, because it's challenging. There's a lot going on.
That's a really good point, and I don't know if just the average everyday person in the community understands that. I mean, the teachers are there to teach, but you're right, there's so much stuff that goes on that the community doesn't see, and they shouldn't see, because there's a lot of privacy issues there, that it makes it really very challenging. And if you have one student whose mental health is deteriorating, that one student in your classroom can impact everybody else's.
It impact the whole school.
Yeah, yes, it can. I've been
I
there.
mean, it's like adding a drop of red ink to a beaker of clear water.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
mean, and here's the thing. Conversely, what you do affects the beaker too, as an educator, administrator, mental health professional, or whatever. I mean, and that's when you need to have a moment of pause, I think. Because for me, I was like, okay, I need to step back and take a breath. What am I doing?
Well, and I would just say this to Julie, that's also why it's important for them to have support from the top trickling down.
Right.
Because, the other piece of that is parents. We want our parents to support our teachers and educators too, and them not being attacked, because it does happen. So that's why it's so important we talk about what can we do to help from the top down, not the critical stuff.
Right. And everybody working together in a positive way for the kid, because the agenda is about the child.
And I heard Deb say that the focus should be on health and safety. And those of you that are educators know that that's the bottom rung of Is it Maslow? Did I say that right? Of
That's
Maslow.
right.
Hierarchy
Yeah, that's right.
needs, yeah.
And
That's
I
right.
think sometimes that's something that we all forget. We have students that are coming to school that are not in what would be considered in their mind or in reality, they're not safe. And if you're not safe, you can't climb that hierarchy, which leads to your learning. So we,
Mhm.
Yeah, I'd even say food, clothing, all basic. I mean,
all of
there's
it.
just a ton of stuff. I mean, a lot of times I'd like, sew and fix somebody's backpack or whatever,
So,
And
so
in the job description, but just do what you got to do. Get a kid a pair of shoes,
yeah.
whatever.
What we really need to do, in my opinion, as a society, not that my opinion counts very much, but we need to go back and we need to look at that hierarchy and we need to say, are we providing these things? Are we ensuring that our students, our families have these things? What obstacles are we placing in their way that doesn't allow them to feel that they're safe and healthy? I think if we would spend some time doing that, we might be in a better situation as a nation, but that's my soapbox. So, um, let me see. If you guys had a magic wand, and Deb used one of my favorite terms of all time, if I were in charge of the world, yeah, and you had a magic wand, what changes would you make to prioritize mental health in our schools?
Uh, Well, I, if I had a magic wand, because this is something that we still deal with in 2025, there still is a stigma about mental health. Like, oh, you don't need to go talk to so and so, or you can handle this. You're tough. You can do this. So, and then if you do go do that, then there's still a little bit of a stigma. So I think that's one thing that I would want to see get better. I would want to see it, kind of like I said earlier, to be part of our daily routine, just like we emphasize respect, we emphasize value, that we emphasize, brushing our teeth, all that. We need to emphasize taking care of mental health and making that a priority just with every human that's, um, in the building or actually on planet Earth. But we do know that, like I said earlier, we don't know what goes on behind closed doors with kids. And so if we could have the mentality of, we need to get them support, we need to get them whatever they need so that they can function and learn in school. I think that would be my magic wand that I'd wave and say, we're doing it, we're doing it. And also, once again, I would want to do the supportive for staff.
Yeah, and I think we'd also say training is like key. And also as a society, it's interesting. I don't think he'd mind. My brother does a lot of work. He's a chief court administrator in a large community in Missouri, and we were talking about it. 95% of the people that are incarcerated have a trauma background. So you think about this, if we spent a little bit more time, energy, effort, training, and that sort of thing to help these individuals, we would have individuals that would be working, paying taxes, contributing to society and that sort of thing. You can either turn a blind eye, to it and, say, people are just going to have to figure it out, or you can make it more of a priority. Homelessness, comorbidity with substance abuse, severe mental health. I mean, I know we're kind of talking about schools, but here's the deal. Every single person that I'm talking about was a kindergartner at one time.
Absolutely. And that 95%, that is, to me, that is staggering when you say
Well, and you think about the expense of that. I mean, it's just, and other things, like the most expensive thing, because I used to do float things with, going into ER and stuff like that early in my career. What are the most expensive forms of health treatment? It's violence.
yeah,
I mean, it's unbelievable. And we have a real issue with violence in our country. And It's very expensive. It's very costly, and it goes back to the square. It goes back to the energy. It goes back to, hey, am I being a part of the solution, or, or do I need to take a step back? And that's the thing. I think all teachers and staff, need to be supportive of one another and understand, hey, like you're doing a really critical thing each and every day. And, it's kind of like, law enforcement. I work with a lot of people that are involved in law enforcement. And it's interesting because I had a law enforcement officer tell me, whenever you have contact with law enforcement, it's like one of the worst days of your life. It means something either really, really bad happened, or, you did something that, is going to create issues, and that those individuals are bombarded with that all the time. And they're just trying to keep the, community safe and uphold the law, and again, it's rule of law, caring about one another. Am I going to be a part of the solution or part of the problem? And I think that goes all the way to the top, and it goes all the way to the bottom. And I think if we do a better job with that, hopefully, it will have a benefit to our society as a whole. It's a good thing for humanity. Caring about other people, it's good. And you know what? The other thing is it keeps you safe.
That's true. It's very true. So I have one last question, and then we'll see if Betsy or Tori or if anyone on Facebook has any questions. If there was one thing you wish people understood about mental health in our schools, what would it be?
No, there's trauma out there. It's pervasive.
And it's real.
100%. And here's the thing: there's some people that are on the other side of the fence. If I asked, they wouldn't hold their hand up probably, but that includes teachers. There's a lot of people that have been in trauma situations that are mental health professionals.
Sure.
People that in helping professions, engineers, doctors. I mean, it's not just people that are free and reduced, it's across the board.
Absolutely.
Well, what I would just say real quick, and this is maybe just a comment, but if we don't support mental health, what are we really saying? Because stress isn't going anywhere. So if we're not going to support mental health, what's going to happen? So I think that the thing that I'd like everybody to, acknowledge or understand is that we're going to have to implement some new ways and some more interventions in the schools just because of what we're living through. And if we don't, then stress is going to increase in every direction. So
I will tell you that retirement is a good remedy for stress. I highly recommend it. I think we should be able to retire when we're like 35.
Hey, you don't have to rub it in too.
That'd be great.
So
Can't wait.
Now I know why you're blurring your background to protect you, right?
yeah, well, it's because my house is a disaster, like always. Betsy or Tori, do you guys have any questions?
I've been sitting here just taking notes like crazy, and I'm going to make a Facebook post. John won't see it. He doesn't look at Facebook.
That's right. I won't.
But just trying to summarize what my take home points from this, because that's the joy of running the Facebook page, is I get to put my opinions out there and pretend I'm the whole board. But I try to rein it in. But I think that the two most amazing things, I mean, I totally get the positivity is important, and we need to feed that positivity into our students and feed it into our teachers and be part of the solution and not part of the problem. But from a physician perspective, the two things I heard that blew me away were right at the beginning. When you experience the news, your brain, if you're looking at a war, your brain thinks you're in a war. If you think you're in a school shooting, or if you're looking at a school shooting, you're looking at a horrible car accident, your brain thinks you're there. Never occurred to me, but it's so obvious.
All the time.
And the second thing is, you can't hold gratitude and anxiety in the same mind at the same time. It seems so simple.
It's simple, but it's not easy.
It's
No.
hard when all the bugs are hitting the windshield.
I always
feel like one of the bugs.
I always had a saying when I was working with teachers that I was either the bug today and I got taken out, or I was the windshield and I took care of something else.
But you know what else? If you're the windshield, you're protecting all the people in the car.
Yeah,
Oh,
you are.
And that,
Like-
that's,
But you still got to take care, but you still got to hold on to the wheel and take care of yourself and make sure you're not falling asleep or whatever.
that's true. Tori, do you have any questions?
Tori's being a student tonight. Tori put that in the chat.
I didn't see the chat. Do we have any Facebook questions?
Nope. Everyone's
Okay.
just soaking it all in.
Yeah, and it's a lot to soak in, and I've talked to you guys numerous times about this very topic. And every time I talk to you guys, I learn something new. So thank you.
Well, thank you. We learned a lot from you too.
Yeah, how to cuss,
Next
probably
time we're going to work on training your husband to watch your dog. Okay, we'll work on it.
kidding. We
She'll
need-
hypnotize him or something.
Okay,
Turn her loose, you know.
we're gonna thank you guys very much. Tell
Thank
Noah
you.
hi for me. Tell Chelsea hi for me.
will
And
do.
We will talk to you later.
God
So
bless.
Thank you.
Appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Nice
you.
to meet you.
8:02 is signing off. Thank you.